One of the questions that we get asked all the time is there any way for me as a syndicator to make money, given I'm taking on all the risk, I'm signing mortgages, I'm finding properties, I'm doing management? Are there sources of income available for me? And how do I understand if there's enough income for me to take on the risk? So hi, I'm Gene Trowbridge, and I'm here with my law partner, Jonathan Nieh, and we are TBD with TLG. And so our TBD to be determined topic today is how syndicators make money. Are we ready to talk about this, Jonathan?
I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay, well, I'm going to let you take it away. We're going to cover this in maybe 3 chunks. Syndicators can make money at the beginning of the project, during the middle of the project, and during the end of the project. You know, acquisition, operation, and disposition. So, Jonathan, why don't you talk about the way that we see syndicators making money during the acquisition phase of their offering?
Sure. Yeah. So I think there's 2 main fees that we've seen that syndicators often charge upfront during the acquisition process. First one is acquisition fee. So that's usually based on the acquisition price of the property, you know, like a certain percentage of the purchase price of the property, for example. And it's compensation for the manager or the syndicator's efforts in, you know, doing due diligence on the property, finding the property, you know, putting the deal together up front on behalf of the investors. So that's kind of the, you know, reason, and the I guess the reason that the syndicator is able to charge this fee is because they're doing all this work up front to find the property. So you need to be compensated for that work. The other one that we often see is like an organizational or due diligence fee. It's similar to acquisition fee, but it's not necessarily based on the purchase price of the property, right? Sometimes it's, you know, it's based on just a certain percentage of the amount of money that's being raised, or it could be just a flat amount. And I mean, it's similar reasoning behind the organizational due diligence fee as the acquisition fee is, you know, the syndicators doing all this work to set up the deal. You know, they're forming entities, they're hiring us, the attorneys, to do all the work. You know, there's a lot of work involved in setting up a syndication. So, you know, that's the basis for, you know, charging this fee, you know, to be compensated for that work, because, you know, it is business, right? You're running a business as a syndicator, you're doing all this work. So, you know, you should be compensated for that work. That being said, I mean, we've talked about it a lot in our other podcasts about, you know, mistakes that first-time syndicators make. But, you know, one thing that you should kind of avoid is, you know, front-loading a lot of your fees. So if you're charging a huge acquisition fee and it's your first time doing a syndication, I mean, that doesn't look good to investors, right? I mean, investors probably think you're just trying to make a lot of money up front and you know, running off with their money. So that's something that you probably want to avoid if you're starting out, is, you know, front loading your fees. Are there any other, you know, fees that you've seen that, you know, come up before the actual acquisition of the property?
No, I think those are the main 2, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the range. It seems to me, Jonathan, that when we see people who are doing an acquisition fee as a percentage of the price of the property, it's somewhere between 1% and 3%. Don't you find that's the case?
Yeah.
Okay, between 1% and 3%. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that, let's say it's 3%. 3% on the price of a property could be a lot of money. And depending upon how much leverage you're going to have, that 3% based on the price of the property could turn out to be a really big chunk of the initial money you're raising. The most outlandish example would be, is let's say you're going to buy a property, and between the seller financing and the bank financing, it's 100% financed. Well, you can't take a 3% acquisition fee unless you're going to raise at least 3% of the property, and then what do you need the money for? So that's a problem. So if it's highly leveraged, we do have a problem with that fee. I don't know if I'm explaining it very well. Let me come at it at a different range. When we put together the sources and uses, when we look at the money that doesn't go to the property, the money that's eaten up by fees in the marketplace today, it shouldn't be more than 5, 6, 7% of the money that's raised. So when you put together your sources and uses and you take your 3% acquisition fee and compare it to how much you raise, if that turns out to be 10, 12, 15% of what you raise, that's too much. You're going to have to back off of that. So in that case, we would go out and we would use the due diligence fee, which is based simply on the amount of money that's raised. And when you do a blind pool and you're going to buy multiple properties, you don't have any acquisition fee to start with. You just simply are raising money. So in that case, you could take a due diligence fee and collect 1% of the money raised, or you put off the acquisition fee until you buy a specific property, and then with every property you buy, you charge for the acquisition fee. So there's a lot to it, right, Jonathan? A lot of ways to plan the best way to do the acquisition fee. But you're absolutely right. If you take all your money up front, it's going to be a barrier to getting people to invest in the opportunity you present them. And if anything goes wrong, you're going to be criticized for taking money before the investors even get their money back. So that's a problem. Now on operations, we could spend an hour talking about all the different types of fees we see in operations, right, Jonathan?
Oh yeah, I mean, people are creative, so whatever you can think of.
Right, and we're just talking about fees right now. When Jonathan comes back, we can talk about sharing the cash flows, which happens at operations and at disposition. But let's just talk about fees. One of the fees that is very common is an asset management fee. Someone needs to manage the company, not the property, but the company. And so that asset management fee, more often than not, is based on the amount of revenue that's received by the company. Sometimes it's a flat fee based on a monthly fee. Sometimes it's even a fee that's based on the amount of money raised totally, and you collect the same fee every year. So there are a number of ways to do asset management fee. Someone has to get paid for running the company. Then another fee that's common is property management fee. Oftentimes our syndicators provide local, on-the-ground property management, and you get paid for that. Typically, a fee that's common in the area, that's market rate, and so as property management is a fee. Another one of a couple of the ones that we see often would be a refinancing fee. If the company needs to refinance the property, it's possible that someone's going to have to do all the work on that. So the manager could get paid 0.5% or 1% of what the new loan amount is for refinancing the property. Secondly would be a disposition fee, a fee paid to the manager for the work that they do in completing the sale or the exchange of the property. The next thing that we could see is a construction management fee. Sometimes we're buying properties that are under construction or renovated, and a lot of capital expenditures, and the manager wants to get a fee based on a percentage of the money that's spent in preparing the property for its use. So I think those are the most common ones I've seen. Jonathan, have I left anything out on the operation phase?
No, those are the most common. I mean, maybe not necessarily relevant to this conversation, but we oftentimes see like guarantor fee. So if you
That's
do
a
have
good
like a
one.
third party, it's like signing on the loan, that person might get a percentage
Right.
of the loan proceeds.
And that might be the key principle.
Yeah.
The offering may very well have a key principal in it to come in and sign on the loan. And so there is a fee paid to the key principal that may not generally go to the syndicator, but the signature on the loan is worth something. And so someone needs to be paid for that. So there we go. All right, take us on to fee sharing and what happens operations, not fee sharing, but cash flow sharing during operations, and take us down to the disposition.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is probably the area where syndicators can be the most creative with how they structure things. I mean, in the most basic sense, if you want to do some sort of equity split with your investors, I think that's the simplest way to do it, right? Is when you get to cash distributions during operations of the property, you just do a simple split, for example, 80-20. So 80% of the distributable cash goes to the investors, and then 20% goes to you as a syndicator. That's probably the simplest and easiest way to structure it. Another way you could do it, though, is with a preferred return. So, I mean, this is pretty common in the space. I think a lot of our clients use preferred return, and I think a lot of investors in this area kind of expect preferred return. But basically, you for example, you would do a 6% preferred return. So do a 6% preferred return, and then anything after that is split 80-20. So when you pay cash distributions during operations, first the investors get 6% based on their investment, and then any extra cash after that is split 80-20. You could get pretty complicated with things. So if we want to get into the weeds a little bit, I mean, the most complicated things that we've seen, I think, are some sort of waterfall plan where you have a preferred return, and then depending on certain target metrics, the plan changes, right? So you do it so that in the previous example you have a 6% preferred return and then split 80-20 until the investors achieve a 20% IRR, for example, and then anything after that is split 60-40 between the investors and the syndicator. So once you hit these targets, the syndicator is able to get a higher share of cash flow. And the basis for that is you're hitting these targets, right? You're hitting the targets for the investors. The investors are getting 20% return potentially. So because of that, I deserve more. I'm doing more work to get you, the investor, more money. So I deserve a larger share of cash flow because of that. And I mean, you go from there, right? Like you could make it as many waterfall steps as you want, right? So after you split 60-40, if the investors then hit 25%, then you split 50-50. We've seen some crazy things out there. But that's operations. Once you get to the disposition, when you sell the property, usually how we structure is, you have to structure it so that you pay your investors back 100%, right? So they get their initial capital back, and then you do the split, whatever split that you wanna structure. Did I miss anything, Gene?
Well, no, I don't think you did, but there are some, as you said, some areas of complication here. One of the things that could happen is in the middle of the holding period, you could refinance the property. And then you give the investors some of their money back. So one thing to understand is the preferred return is always based on the amount the investor still has left in the property. So that's one thing. Another thing is, what if you've set up a preferred return and you haven't been able to make it make all those payments during the holding period, and now it's time to sell the property. Generally, we would say that the cash distribution on the sale would be the return of the unreturned capital so that the investors are made whole, then another check if it's available to bring the investors up to their full, as we were using the example, 6% preferred return over the life of the investment, and then the split between the syndicator or not. Now, sometimes the cash flow split is a preferred return, but it's not compounded. You could say it's compounded. So if, let's say, in the first year, it's the example is it's a compound, it's cumulative. I didn't mean to use the word compound. I meant to use the word cumulative. It's a cumulative preferred return, Jonathan. So if you're projecting 6 and the first year you do 4, you're short 2%. So if it's cumulative, the next year, the first check you need to write is for the 2% to catch up to the previous year, and then you go forward for the 6%. And if it's cumulative, then when you get to the sale is when you have to do the second check to catch them up with the full preferred return. Now, if it's not cumulative, it's just a preferred return, and let's say the first year you had projected 6, but you only give 4, well, that's what they get. It's non-cumulative. So the 2% didn't happen, it didn't happen. So now you go into the next year and you're looking to give them 6. Now you could have a non-cumulative preferred return during operations, and you could still come back at the sale and say, okay, during the operations, it was not cumulative. We gave you 4% the first year and 6% every other year. So after we give you your money back, we're going to catch up and give you the 2. So there's just a million variations on that. And so it takes some analysis. It takes some analyzing the deal. You know, people are going to say, well, what's a good preferred return? What's a good IRR? Well, Jonathan, the answer is that it depends on the property. You know, if you're going to build a property from scratch and it's going to take you 3 years to get it fully occupied, why would you put a preferred return every year? There's no cash flow. Okay. But you could say, well, we're not going to distribute any cash flow, but at the sale, after we give you your money back, now we'll do a catch-up preferred return. Well, that would work. So the deal is the deal. All the money that's going to be distributed comes from the operation of the property, probably minus the annual debt service that you pay to the lender. Whatever's left is available for distribution. So in strategizing, you have to say, okay, what do I have to distribute? And then you look at that. And if, in fact, what you have to distribute is only, let's say, 2 or 3%, and your group of investors are investors who want monthly cash flow, that's what they're investing for, you might not have a property that you can syndicate because you might bring something to the market that isn't saleable. Or if you're doing a development deal where there isn't going to be any cash flow, that's okay, as long as your group of investors are looking for equity buildup and not current cash flow. So you have to match the deal and the economic benefits of the deal with your investor pool. So it all goes back to that darn database of investors, Jonathan. Yeah. What do you have in your database? Do you know them? What are they looking for? You've got to bring out an offering that matches what they're looking for. And then you can't forget, as we tell them all the time, Jonathan, you and I tell them, you know, this isn't a charity. We're not working for free. The syndicators need to make a living. No investor really wants a syndicator to work for free, because how comfortable would you be as an investor if you knew that the sponsor wasn't getting paid? If anything goes wrong, they're going to forget about you and disappear. So you can't really do that. So what else do we need to talk about as far as how do syndicators get paid? I guess we could say extremely well. That's that's an answer. They should get paid well for the risk that they take on. But what are your final comments, Jonathan?
Well, I was going to ask you, I think this question might come up, but you talked about doing a catch up for the investors, but is it possible to do a catch up for the syndicator for the preferred return, right?
Oh, we see that. Sometimes we say that the preferred return is going to be 8. Let's say in our example that we've been using, 6 goes to the investors and 2 goes to the sponsor. And then we'll split 80-20. So here comes 2 or 3 years where the only distribution is the 6% to the investors, and the syndicator has never received their 2. So at some point in time, we can have a catch-up provision, whether it's through operations or likely at the disposition. We give the investors their money back. We make the investors whole on the 6%. And then we catch up with the sponsor at all the 2% years that they didn't receive. That's what we've seen, isn't it, Jonathan?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some other crazy formulation where you have to put like a math formula into the PP to do it. But
yeah, but no one understands that, so those deals don't sell. We need a very simple waterfall, if you would, cash flow distribution pattern that sells. Another one I've seen is we're just going to do a 70-30 split, let's say. But if the 70% to the investor doesn't equal 6%, the investor gets all of it. Okay. If the 70-30 split is equal to a 7%, the investor gets 6, and what we split 70-30 is the 1% that's left over. So you could do it like that. That gets a little complicated, but many ways. And we've done an awful lot of offerings, and we've seen a lot of cash flow and fee distribution patterns. And so when you come to us or to do your offering documents, we'll help you, and we'll give you some idea if what you're thinking of is crazy or if it's something that's going to be saleable. And 2 issues are, does what you want to do match what the property produces? And number 2, is it something that the investors can understand? So I guess that's it. That was a good to be determined topic for today, Jonathan. Thanks for bringing that up. As we leave, we want to tell you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Trowbridge Law Group. And we appreciate it. And we'll see you next week at the same time with the next TBD with TLG. Thanks, Jonathan.